The chainsaw screams to life as Marcus tears down the pool fence, water cascading across his driveway like a broken dam. Behind him, Karen's voice pierces the summer air. You'll regret this. But what she doesn't know, what nobody knows, is that Marcus has been planning this moment for 3 years. The same 3 years since her husband's construction company destroyed his family. Now, as police sirens wail in the distance, Marcus grins. Because sometimes, the only way to get justice is to let them think they've won, until they realize they've walked straight into your trap. The first splash echoed across Marcus Chen's backyard at exactly 6:47 a.m., jolting him from the first decent sleep he'd had in weeks. Through his bedroom window, he watched 2 children, maybe 8 and 10 years old, cannonball into the above ground pool that sat precisely 18 inches over his property line. His property line. Marcus rubbed his eyes, hoping the scene would dissolve like a bad dream. Instead, the children's laughter grew louder, joined by the voice of their mother, Karen Fitzgerald, as she emerged from the sliding door of the house next door. Careful, sweeties. Mommy's making pancakes after your swim. 3 months. For 3 months, Marcus had tried the neighborly approach. Polite conversations over the fence. Friendly reminders about property boundaries. Even a printed survey map, with bright yellow highlighter marking the exact spot where the Fitzgerald's pool encroached on his land. Karen had smiled each time, her bleached teeth gleaming like a predator's. Oh, Marcus, don't be such a stick in the mud. It's just a few inches. The kids love that pool. But it wasn't just a few inches. It was 18 inches of his grandmother's rose garden, bulldozed without permission when the Fitzgeralds moved in. 18 inches of the land where his grandmother had taught him to plant seeds and tend flowers, where she'd whispered stories in Mandarin while they worked side by side in the dirt. The land where he'd scattered her ashes just 2 years ago. Marcus pulled on his jeans and work boots, the familiar weight of anger settling in his chest like a stone. Outside, the August heat was already building, promising another scorching day in suburban Phoenix. The Fitzgerald's pool pumps hummed constantly now, draining the neighborhood's water pressure and sending his utility bill skyrocketing. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was Karen's husband, Doug Fitzgerald, owner of Fitzgerald Construction, the same company that had destroyed Marcus's food truck business with their botched renovation of the commercial kitchen. He'd leased downtown. Unlevel floors, faulty plumbing, electrical work that nearly burned the building down. When Marcus tried to sue for damages, Doug's lawyer had buried him in paperwork until Marcus ran out of money for legal fees. His American dream, dead at 32. Now Doug was gone most days, working construction jobs across the state, leaving Karen to play the victim whenever Marcus dared to mention property rights or noise ordinances. She'd perfected the art of tears on command, dabbing her eyes with tissues while explaining to other neighbors how the angry man next door was trying to steal her children's happiness. Marcus stepped onto his back patio, the concrete already hot beneath his boots. In the pool, the Fitzgerald children had discovered his grandmother's koi pond ornament, somehow knocked loose from where it had been cemented near the property line. Look, Mom, the older boy shouted, holding up the delicate ceramic fish. It's like a mermaid tail. That's nice, honey, Karen called back, not bothering to look. She was absorbed in her phone, probably posting another social media roundabout. Entitled immigrants who didn't understand how things worked in America. Marcus had seen those posts. Screenshots forwarded by concerned neighbors, filled with barely veiled racism and complaints about property values dropping because of certain types of people moving into their neighborhood. Excuse me, Marcus called out, his voice carrying. Across the pool area. That ornament belongs to me. My grandmother. Oh, Marcus. Karen's voice dripped with fake sweetness as she looked up from her phone. You startled me. The kids found this little thing floating around. So cute. It's not floating around. It was cemented to my property. Your pool installation must have loosened it. Karen's smile faltered for just a moment, long enough for Marcus to see the calculation behind her eyes. Well, I'm sure it was just an accident. Boys, give the nice man his little fish thing. But the children were already tossing the ornament back and forth like a football, their wet hands making it slippery. Marcus watched his grandmother's memorial decoration sail through the air, each throw driving the rage deeper into his bones. Be careful with that, he said, moving closer to the fence. It's very old, very fragile. The ceramic fish shattered against the pool's metal frame with a sound like breaking bells. For a moment, everything went silent. Even the children stopped laughing, sensing the shift in the air. Marcus stared at the pieces floating in the chlorinated water, each fragment a memory destroyed. "Oopsie," Karen said with a shrug. "Accidents happen, Marcus. Maybe you shouldn't leave your decorations so close to an active play area." Something snapped inside Marcus's chest, not breaking, but clicking into place like a lock. He turned away from the fence without another word, walking back toward his house with measured steps. "Where are you going?" Karen called after him. "Don't you want to fish out the pieces?" Marcus didn't answer. He was already planning. In his garage, he pulled out the property survey documents his lawyer had prepared 3 years ago. Before, Doug Fitzgerald's legal team had crushed his lawsuit. Every measurement, every boundary marker, every inch of land ownership clearly documented and officially recorded with the county. Then he opened his laptop and began researching pool removal companies. By noon, he had his answer: Desert Dreams Pool Service, a local company that specialized in above-ground pool dismantling. More importantly, they could be there by 3 p.m. Marcus called them first, then the county inspector's office, then his homeowner's insurance company. Each conversation was brief, professional, and carefully documented. At 2:45 p.m., Marcus heard Karen's car pull into her driveway, back from her usual afternoon shopping trip. Through his window, he watched her unload bags from Target and Starbucks, her movements casual and unhurried. She had no idea what was coming. The Desert Dreams truck arrived at exactly 3 p.m., followed by a county inspector in an official vehicle. Marcus met them at his front door, survey documents in hand. "Mr. Chen." The pool service foreman was a weathered man named Rodriguez who looked like he'd seen every possible homeowner drama. "You said you need an above-ground pool removed from your property." "That's correct. The neighbors installed it 18 inches onto my land without permission. I have the official survey here, and Inspector Williams can verify the boundary markers." Inspector Williams, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, was already walking the property line with a measuring tape and GPS device. "Mr. Chen is correct," she called out. "This pool is clearly encroaching on his property. The installation should never have been approved in this location." Rodriguez nodded, unloading tools from his truck. "Happens more than you'd think. People assume they know where their property ends. We'll have this down in about 2 hours." That's when Karen appeared. "What the hell is going on here?" She stalked across her backyard, her face flushed with anger and confusion. "Marcus, what are these people doing?" "Removing a pool from my property," Marcus replied calmly. "You were given multiple opportunities to address this issue through proper channels." "Your property. That pool cost us $8,000. You can't just—" "Mrs. Fitzgerald," Inspector Williams interrupted, showing her clipboard. "Your pool is 18 inches onto Mr. Chen's property. Without a written easement agreement, this constitutes trespassing. Mr. Chen has every legal right to remove structures from his own land." Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But the kids. They love that pool. We just put it in 3 months ago." "Should have checked your property lines first," Rodriguez said, already disconnecting the pool's filtration system. "Water's got to be drained before we can dismantle the frame." "You bastard." Karen whirled on Marcus, her mask of suburban pleasantness finally shredding. "You planned this. You waited until I was gone so you could ambush us." "I plan to protect my property rights," Marcus said evenly. "Something you clearly don't understand." The pool water began rushing out through a large drainage hose, creating a temporary river across both properties. Karen's children appeared. At the sliding door, their faces pressed against the glass as they watched their summer paradise disappearing. "Mommy, why are they taking our pool?" the younger child called out. Karen's eyes filled with tears, real ones this time, Marcus noted, with satisfaction. "Because the mean man next door is a selfish monster who hates children." "The mean man next door owns the land your pool is sitting on," Inspector Williams corrected. "If you have issues with this removal, I suggest you contact your homeowners insurance company and discuss the legal ramifications of building on someone else's property." As the water level dropped, Marcus saw more of his grandmother's garden ornaments at the bottom of the pool: small ceramic frogs, a decorative bamboo fountain piece, even some of the river rocks she'd carefully arranged around her FA. Bedroom filled with the remnants of his destroyed business, old permits, failed loan applications, and a folder marked Fitzgerald Construction that he'd kept for 3 years like a talisman of unfinished business. The security footage was crystal clear. Karen's voice, captured in high definition as she stood near her kitchen window, plotting his destruction with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced real consequences. But Marcus had learned not to act on impulse. That's what had cost him everything before, rushing into legal battles without understanding the full scope of his enemy's resources. This time would be different. At 6 a.m., he made his first call. Janet Morales, attorney at law. The voice was crisp, professional. Ms. Morales, this is Marcus Chen. We spoke 3 years ago about Fitzgerald Construction. A pause. Mr. Chen. I remember. I'm sorry we couldn't do more for your case back then. Their legal team was aggressive. I understand. But I may have something new. Something that changes the dynamic considerably. I'm listening. Marcus played the recording over the phone, watching through his window as Karen emerged to collect her morning newspaper. She looked haggard, her usual perfect appearance cracked around the edges. That's actionable, Janet said after hearing the full conversation. Conspiracy to file false reports, potential harassment charges. But Marcus, going after people like the Fitzgeralds, they fight dirty. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for 3 years. By 8 a.m., Marcus was at the county assessor's office, requesting detailed records on both properties. The clerk, a middle-aged woman named Rosa who recognized him from his previous visits, handed over the files with a sympathetic smile. Still, dealing with those neighbors? She asked. More than dealing with. Finally taking action. The documents revealed something interesting. The Fitzgeralds had filed for a pool permit 6 months ago, listing the installation coordinates as entirely on their own property. Either their surveyor had made a massive error, or someone had deliberately falsified the paperwork. Marcus photographed every page, then drove to the city planning office. The planning department was housed in a converted warehouse that smelled of coffee and bureaucratic frustration. Marcus found the permits clerk, a young man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else on earth. I need to see the approved pool installation permit for 2847 Desert Vista Lane, Marcus said, sliding his ID across the counter. You the property owner. Adjacent property owner. The installation encroaches on my land. The clerk pulled up, the file on his computer, frowning at the screen. That's weird. The permit was approved, but there's a note here about a complaint filed yesterday. What kind of complaint? Says here someone reported potential fraud in the original application. Anonymous tip. The permit's been flagged for review. Marcus kept his expression neutral, but inside he was smiling. Someone else was already investigating. The Fitzgeralds. The question was who, and how could he use that to his advantage? Can I get copies of the original application? Sure, but you'll have to request them through the formal process. Takes about a week. Marcus filled out the paperwork, knowing he probably wouldn't need to wait that long. If the Fitzgeralds were already under investigation, things would start moving quickly. His phone buzzed as he walked back to his car. Karen. Marcus, we need to talk. Can you come over? He almost laughed at the audacity. After threatening him the night before, now she wanted to negotiate? But curiosity won out over caution. I'll be right there. Karen was waiting in her front yard, dressed in yoga, pants and an oversized sweater that made her look smaller, more vulnerable. The suburban armor was coming off, revealing the desperate woman underneath. Look, I know things got heated yesterday, she began, wrapping her arms around herself. Maybe we can work something out. Some kind of compromise. What did you have in mind? Well, the pool's gone now. Obviously. But maybe we could split the cost of putting in a new one, properly surveyed this time, on our side of the property line. Marcus studied her face, looking for tells. Her eyes kept darting toward the house, where he could see someone moving behind the curtains. Doug was home. That's an interesting offer, Marcus said carefully. But I'm not really interested in having a pool next to my property. The noise, the maintenance, the liability issues. What do you want then? The desperation was creeping into her voice now. Money. We could pay for the damage to your grandmother's things. My grandmother's memorial garden that your husband's company destroyed when they illegally installed your pool. Karen flinched. It was an accident. We didn't know. You knew exactly what you were doing. Marcus's voice remained calm, but each word hit like a hammer. Just like your husband knew exactly what he was doing when he sabotaged my restaurant renovation 3 years ago. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Marcus pulled out his phone, opening the voice recording app. Funny thing about modern security systems, Karen. They pick up sounds from much farther away than people realize. The color drained from her face. Behind the curtains, the movement stopped. Doug was listening now. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Marcus continued. At least, not until your husband comes out here and has an honest conversation about why his construction company has such a pattern of convenient mistakes that always seem to benefit certain clients while destroying others. You're recording this conversation. Karen's voice pitched higher, panic setting in. Arizona is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of without informing the other participants. Another thing I learned from my legal troubles 3 years ago. The front door opened, and Doug Fitzgerald emerged. He was exactly what Marcus remembered, tall, barrel-chested, with a kind of aggressive confidence that came from never being told no. But there was something different now, a wariness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Chen. Doug's voice was gravelly from years of shouting over construction noise. Heard you had quite the tantrum yesterday. Heard you've been busy filing false permits and threatening to use your connections to destroy your neighbors. Doug's jaw tightened. I don't know what my wife might have said, but your wife said exactly what you told her to say. The question is whether you're stupid enough to try following through on those threats. For a moment, Marcus thought Doug might actually take a swing at him. The big man's hands clenched into fists, his face reddening with barely controlled rage. But then Doug's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and whatever he saw there made him go pale. I need to take this. Doug Fitzgerald. His voice was cautious as he answered. Marcus couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but he could read Doug's body language, the way his shoulders hunched, the defensive posture, the quick glances toward Marcus and Karen. No, sir. I understand. Yes, sir. We'll cooperate fully. Doug hung up, staring at his phone like it had turned into a snake. Who was that? Karen asked. The state contractors licensing board. They're opening an investigation into our permitting practices. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction, but kept his expression neutral. Sounds serious. This is your doing, Doug snarled, pointing a thick finger at Marcus. You filed a complaint. I filed several complaints, starting with the city planning office this morning, then the contractors licensing board, then the Better Business Bureau, and finally the State Attorney General's office regarding potential fraud in government documents. Karen made a small, whimpering sound. Doug looked like he might have a stroke. You have no idea what you've done, Doug said, his voice low and dangerous. I've got connections in this city. Friends who won't appreciate you causing trouble for established businesses. Is that a threat, Doug? It's a promise. Marcus smiled, holding up his phone. Arizona revised Statute 13 to 1202. Threatening and intimidating. Class 1 misdemeanor, up to 6 months in jail. Want to make any more promises while I'm recording? Doug's mouth opened and closed, fury and fear warring across his features. Finally, he grabbed Karen's arm. We are going inside. Don't talk to this lunatic anymore. They retreated to their house, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. Marcus stood in their driveway for another moment, savoring the victory, then walked back to his own property. But the satisfaction was short-lived. Doug Fitzgerald wasn't the type to go down quietly, and men like him had ways of fighting back that went beyond legal channels. Marcus was checking his mailbox when he noticed the black sedan parked across the street. Tinted windows, government plates. As he watched, a woman in a dark suit got out and walked toward him. Mr. Chen, I'm Agent Rebecca Torres, Arizona Department of Revenue. We need to discuss some irregularities in your tax filings. Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of irregularities? May we speak inside? It's a sensitive matter. As they walked toward his house, Marcus caught a glimpse of movement in the Fitzgeralds' front window. Doug was there, watching with a satisfied smile. The game was escalating, and Doug Fitzgerald had just played his first countermove. Agent Torres opened her briefcase on Marcus's kitchen table, spreading out documents that made his stomach sink. Tax forms, business records, bank statements, all from his failed restaurant venture 3 years ago. Mr. Chen, we've received allegations that you may have unreported I. Agent Torres was thorough. Marcus had to give her that. For 2 hours, she methodically reviewed every receipt, bank statement, and business record from his failed restaurant, Golden Dragon Kitchen. Her questions were precise, professional, and increasingly pointed as she searched for evidence of the tax evasion allegations. Marcus answered each one honestly, producing documentation for every transaction, every supplier payment, every penny that had flowed through his business. The irony wasn't lost on him. His obsessive record-keeping, born from immigrant parents who taught him to always have proof of legitimacy, was now his salvation. Mr. Chen, Agent Torres said finally, closing the last folder. Your records are actually exceptionally detailed. Most small businesses don't maintain this level of documentation. My family learned early that we had to be better prepared than everyone else, Marcus replied, especially when dealing with contractors who might misrepresent their work quality. Something in his tone made Agent Torres look up sharply. Is there something specific you'd like to tell me about your business closure? Marcus walked to his home office and returned with the thick folder marked Fitzgerald Construction. He'd been saving this moment for 3 years. My restaurant failed because of structural damage caused by Fitzgerald Construction's negligent renovation work. Unlevel floors that destroyed my commercial equipment, faulty plumbing that flooded my kitchen twice, and electrical work that nearly burned down the building. Agent Torres opened the folder, her eyebrows rising as she flipped through photographs of warped floors, water damage, and electrical panels that looked like they'd been installed by a drunk electrician. This is extensive documentation. I learned to document everything after my first conversation with Doug Fitzgerald's lawyer, the man who probably filed the complaint about my tax records. You believe this complaint is retaliatory? Marcus pulled out his phone and played the recording of Karen's threat from the night before. Agent Torres listened with the focused attention of someone who'd heard plenty of conspiracies but rarely encountered actual evidence. Mr. Chen, I need you to understand something. I came here today prepared to find a tax cheat. Instead, I'm looking at what appears to be a pattern of construction fraud, witness intimidation, and now false reporting to federal agencies. What happens now? Now I make some phone calls. Agent Torres was already packing up her files, but Marcus noticed she was also copying information from the Fitzgerald Construction folder. The allegations against you appear to be unfounded, but the evidence you've provided raises serious questions about the complainant's motivations. After Agent Torres left, Marcus felt the familiar weight of waiting settle on his shoulders. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't the victim scrambling to defend himself. He was the hunter, and his trap was finally closing. His phone rang at 4 p.m. Janet Morales. Marcus, I've been making some calls about our friends next door. You're not going to believe what I found. Try me. Fitzgerald Construction has been under investigation by the State Contractors Board for 6 months. Allegations of bid rigging, substandard work, and, get this, filing false permits to secure jobs they weren't qualified for. Marcus smiled grimly. How many complaints? 17 formal complaints in the past 2 years, including 3 from city inspectors who claimed Doug threatened them when they tried to red tag his work. And Doug thought he could intimidate me. There's more. I talked to my contact at the district attorney's office. They've been building a case against Doug for months, but they needed someone willing to go on record. Most of his victims were too scared to testify. But I'm not most victims. No, you're not. Marcus, they want to meet with you tomorrow. If you're willing to testify about what happened to your restaurant, they think they can file criminal charges. That evening, Marcus sat on his back patio, replanting his grandmother's roses in the spot where the Fitzgerald's pool had been. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the recovered earth, and for the first time in months, he felt something resembling peace. Until he heard the shouting from next door. Through the fence, He could see Doug pacing in his backyard. Phone pressed to his ear, his voice carrying clearly in the still air. "I don't care what it costs. I want that son of a bitch destroyed. Use the immigration angle, find something, anything that puts his legal status in question." Marcus set down his gardening trowel and reached for his phone. The recording app was becoming his best friend. "Sir, I understand your frustration," came a voice from Doug's phone, speaker mode, apparently. "But Mr. Chen is a naturalized citizen. His immigration status is not in question." "Then find something else. Tax evasion, code violations, I don't care if you have to plant evidence." Marcus's blood ran cold. Doug Fitzgerald had just suggested planting evidence on a recorded call, while under investigation by multiple state agencies. The voice on the phone sounded uncomfortable. "Mr. Fitzgerald, I can't be party to. You can and you will, if you want to keep getting city contracts. Remember who got your company the courthouse renovation job." Marcus was already emailing the recording to Janet Morales before Doug finished his sentence. Some people never learned when to stop digging their own graves. The next morning brought visitors. First, Agent Torres returned with 2 colleagues and a warrant to search the Fitzgerald's property for documents related to permit fraud. Marcus watched from his kitchen window as they carried out boxes of files, Doug's face growing redder with each trip to their van. Second, Detective Maria Santos from the white-collar crime unit arrived to take Marcus's statement about the bid rigging and construction fraud. She was a small woman with sharp eyes who took notes in shorthand and asked questions that suggested she already knew most of the answers. "Mr. Chen, how many other business owners do you think Mr. Fitzgerald has targeted?" "Based on what I've observed, probably anyone who complained about his work or threatened his reputation. We are going to need you to testify before a grand jury. Are you prepared for that?" Marcus thought about his grandmother, about the American dream that had brought his family here, about 3 years of humiliation and financial ruin. "I've been prepared for 3 years." But the most satisfying visitor came at noon, a city inspector with a clipboard and a very official-looking citation book. "Mr. Chen, I'm Inspector Williams. We spoke yesterday about the pool removal. I'm here about some additional violations we discovered on the Fitzgerald property." Marcus stepped onto his porch, noting how Karen's face appeared in her kitchen window like a pale ghost. "What kind of violations?" "Well, it turns out the pool wasn't the only unpermitted structure. They've got a deck extension, a storage shed, and a fence that all violate setback requirements. Plus, the electrical work for their pool lighting was done without permits and doesn't meet code." Inspector Williams handed Marcus a copy of the citation. "Total fines of $15,000, with an additional $500 per day until the violations are corrected. They've got 30 days to bring everything into compliance or face legal action." Through the window, Marcus could see Karen on her phone, probably calling Doug with the latest catastrophe. Her perfectly manicured neighborhood kingdom was crumbling. Around her, one official document at a time. "There's something else," Inspector Williams added quietly. "Off the record? The anonymous complaint that started this investigation? It came from someone in their own neighborhood. Someone who's been documenting their violations for months." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Any idea who?" "Let's just say you're not the only neighbor who's gotten tired of the Fitzgeralds thinking rules don't apply to them." That afternoon, Marcus was watering his replanted roses when he heard a car door slam with unusual force. Doug was home, and judging by the way he stormed across his yard, the day hadn't gone well. "Chen." Doug's voice boomed across the fence. "Get out here, you coward." Marcus calmly turned off his hose and walked to the property line. Doug was standing there with his fists clenched, his face purple with rage, spittle flying as he spoke. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Running to the government like a little tattletale instead of handling this man to man." "I'm handling it exactly the way the law requires, Doug. Maybe you should try that sometime." "The law?" Doug laughed bitterly. "You want to talk about the law? Let me tell you something about the law in this city. It's run by people I've known for 20 years. People who owe me favors. People like Judge Morrison, the one who's currently under investigation for taking bribes from construction companies." Doug's face went from purple to gray in an instant. "How did you? Public records, Doug. Amazing what you can find when you actually know how to research instead of just making threats. You have no idea what you've unleashed, Doug snarled. This doesn't end with some fines and inspections. I will destroy you. I will destroy your family. I will. You'll what, Doug? Marcus's voice remained calm, but something deadly had crept into his tone. File another false complaint? Try to have me deported from the country where I was born. Maybe plant some evidence like you discussed with your friend yesterday. Doug's mouth fell open. You were listening. I was gardening. You were shouting. In Arizona, that makes your conversation public domain. Marcus pulled out his phone. Marcus jerked awake to the sound of his security system's piercing alarm. His bedroom bathed in the red strobe of emergency lights. Through his window, he could see two figures in dark clothing sprinting across his backyard, vaulting the fence, into the Fitzgerald's property. By the time the police arrived 12 minutes later, the intruders were long gone. But they'd left their calling card. Marcus's home office had been ransacked, file cabinets overturned, his computer smashed, and 3 years' worth of carefully organized evidence scattered across the floor like confetti. Looks like they were after something specific, Officer Rodriguez observed, surveying the destruction. Your bedroom wasn't touched, neither was the living room. They went straight for the office. Marcus knelt among the scattered papers, his hands shaking as he tried to gather the fragments of his grandmother's immigration documents that had been torn apart. They took the external hard drives, all my backup files. Any idea what they might have been looking for? Before Marcus could answer, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Stop digging or next time we won't be so gentle. This is your only warning. Officer Rodriguez read the message over Marcus's shoulder and whistled softly. Mr. Chen, I think you need to consider that this might be connected to your ongoing disputes with the neighbors. You think? I'm recommending we post a patrol car outside for the next few nights. And maybe you should think about staying somewhere else until this settles down. But Marcus wasn't going anywhere. That would be exactly what Doug wanted. For him to run, to disappear, to become another victim who got tired of fighting the system. Instead, Marcus spent the morning at Kinko's, printing out copies of every document he'd uploaded to the cloud. Doug's thugs had taken his local files, but they'd missed the encrypted backups stored on 3 different servers. By noon, he was sitting in District Attorney Sarah Martinez's office, surrounded by boxes of evidence that painted a picture of corruption stretching back 5 years. Mr. Chen, I have to ask, are you certain you want to proceed with this? The break-in last night suggests your opposition is willing to escalate beyond legal boundaries. They broke into my home and destroyed my grandmother's belongings, Marcus replied quietly. The only question is whether you're willing to prosecute or if Doug Fitzgerald's connections run deeper than I thought. Dia Martinez was a woman in her 50s who'd built her career taking down white-collar criminals. She leaned back in her chair, studying Marcus with the calculating gaze of someone who'd learned to separate legitimate witnesses from glory seekers. Let me be completely honest with you. Doug Fitzgerald has friends in this city. Powerful friends. If we move forward with this prosecution, it's going to get very ugly very quickly. How ugly? The kind where people's backgrounds get scrutinized. Their family members investigated. Their entire lives turned upside down by teams of private investigators looking for any angle to discredit them. Marcus thought about his parents, running their small grocery store, minding their own business, building their quiet American dream. Then he thought about his grandmother's torn documents scattered across his office floor. When do we start? Dia Martinez smiled for the first time since he'd entered her office. We already have. The grand jury convenes Monday morning. That afternoon, Marcus returned home to find Karen waiting in his driveway. But this wasn't the same woman who'd threatened him 3 days ago. This Karen looked like she'd aged a decade, hollow. Cheeks, dark circles under her eyes, hands that shook as she clutched a manila envelope. Marcus, please. We need to talk. I think we've said everything we need to say. No, we haven't. Karen's voice cracked. You don't understand what you've done. Doug isn't the only one involved in this. Marcus paused, his key halfway to the lock. What do you mean? Karen glanced around nervously, as if expecting surveillance. The construction contracts, the permit approvals, the judge, it goes all the way up. City council members, the mayor's office, even some state legislators. And you know this how? Because I've been keeping records too. Karen held up the envelope. Insurance, you might say. For situations exactly like this. Marcus studied her face, looking for the trap. But all he saw was a woman terrified of the monster she'd helped create. What do you want, Karen? Protection. For me and my kids. Doug's. He's not the man I married. The pressure from all these investigations, the money problems, the threats from his partners. He's talking about making this whole thing disappear. Permanently. Meaning you, Marcus. He's talking about making you disappear. Marcus felt ice run through his veins. Are you saying your husband is planning to have me killed? I'm saying my husband is cornered, desperate, and connected to people who solve problems with violence instead of lawyers. Karen thrust the envelope at him. Everything's in there. Bank records, recorded conversations, photographs of meetings. Doug kept it all as leverage against his partners, but now it's evidence of a conspiracy. Take it. Give it to the DA. But please, when this all comes out, remember that I tried to do the right thing. Marcus accepted the envelope, feeling the weight of what felt like hundreds of documents inside. Why are you doing this, Karen? Really? Tears started running down her face, cutting tracks through her carefully applied makeup. Because yesterday, my 8-year-old son asked me why the bad men broke into the nice man's house. And I realized, we are the bad men in this story. We've been the bad men all along. She turned to leave, then stopped. Marcus, the black SUV you've been seeing? Those aren't Doug's people. They're his partners. The ones who have too much to lose if this corruption investigation goes public. After Karen left, Marcus sat in his car for 20 minutes, reading through the contents of the envelope. What he found made his blood run cold. Bank records showing payments from a shell company to Doug's construction business, with matching deposits to city officials' personal accounts. Photographs of Doug meeting with known organized crime figures. Recorded conversations discussing the elimination of problem witnesses in previous corruption cases. And at the bottom of the stack, a typed list of names under the heading Cleanup Targets. Marcus Chen was number 3 on the list. The first 2 names had dates next to them from earlier this year. A quick Google search revealed that both men had died in apparent accidents, one in a construction site cave-in, another in a hit-and-run while jogging. Marcus immediately called DA Martinez. Sarah, I need protection. Now. What's happened? Karen Fitzgerald just gave me evidence of a murder conspiracy. I'm not just a witness anymore. I'm a target. Jesus Christ. Okay, don't go home. Come. Straight to my office. I'm calling the FBI. But as Marcus started his car, he noticed the black SUV pulling out of its parking spot across the street. It followed him for 3 blocks before Marcus realized this wasn't intimidation anymore. This was a hunting party. Marcus took a sharp right into a shopping center, tires squealing as he weaved between parked cars. The SUV followed, no longer bothering with subtlety. Through his rearview mirror, Marcus could see 2 men in the front seats, the passenger talking rapidly into a phone. He yanked his own phone from his pocket, calling 911 while taking another sharp turn toward the main road. 911, what's your emergency? This is Marcus Chen. I'm being followed by men who are planning to kill me. I'm a witness in a federal corruption investigation. The SUV rammed into his rear bumper, sending his car skidding sideways. Marcus fought to maintain control, his phone flying across the passenger seat. I'm at the intersection of Camelback and 32nd Street, he shouted, hoping the 911 operator could still hear him. Black SUV, license plate. Another ram, harder this time. Marcus's car spun completely around, ending up facing oncoming traffic. The SUV had stopped about 50 yards away, and Marcus could see the passenger getting out, reaching inside his jacket for something that definitely wasn't a wallet. That's when the cavalry arrived. 3 police cars converged on the intersection. Simultaneously, sirens wailing, officers jumping out with weapons drawn. The man with the gun immediately put his hands up, but the SUV's driver tried to flee. He made it exactly 1 block before running into a roadblock that seemed to have appeared. Out of nowhere, as Marcus sat in the back of a police car, giving his statement to Detective Santos, He watched federal agents loading both men into unmarked vans. The passenger, who turned out to be carrying a .45 caliber pistol and a suppressor, was already talking to investigators, apparently eager to trade information for leniency. "Mr. Chen," Detective Santos said, closing her notebook, "based on what just happened and the evidence Ms. Fitzgerald provided, we are placing you in protective custody until the grand jury hearing on Monday." "What about my family? My parents?" "Already taken care of. They're being moved to a safe house as we speak." Marcus leaned back in the seat, exhaustion finally hitting him. 3 days ago, his biggest problem had been an illegally installed pool. Now he was in witness protection because he'd accidentally uncovered a corruption network that stretched across city government. "Detective, what happens to Doug Fitzgerald now?" "That depends on what his hired guns tell us. But between the evidence you've provided and what we just witnessed, I'd say Mr. Fitzgerald's construction days are